Well, today is known as Good Friday, and yet that term has been made famous because of one man's death on a Roman cross. How could anything be good about that? How can anything be good about a man named Jesus being beaten, mocked, and nailed to a cross to die? Well, when we look at surface level at the story of the crucifixion, then it isn't that good. But once we go a bit deeper to try and understand what actually happened, then we see that it is the greatest and most groundbreaking moment in all of human history. We notice a difference between the crowd from yesterday as we studied and looked at them praising and worshipping Jesus to today as we look at the crucifixion. They've changed from worship and now they want Jesus dead. Pilate was the guy in charge of Jesus' trial, and Jesus never stood a chance. It was so unfair on him. He was innocent. And yet Pilate knew he was innocent. But he gave in to the crowd, and they're shouting and they're claiming that Jesus needed to be crucified. And that's exactly what he did. He handed Jesus over. He was beaten. He was mocked. He went through an awful, awful situation. You see, the Romans had invented a brutal way of executing someone. On the cross, what would happen is you would get nailed in your hands and in your feet to this bit of wood, and then set up high for everyone to see and to look and to laugh and to mock you. But the thing that killed you was this. You couldn't breathe when you were hanging on the cross. All you could do was push your feet up and try and gasp for air. And yet after hours and hours of hanging there, once fatigue set in, lack of food and water hit you, it was nearly impossible to push yourself up to have a breath, and that's how you would die. This is what Jesus went through on the cross, an innocent man dying there on the cross. And on top of that, on top of the pain, the suffering, was the mockery from the crowd. They shouted and they said, "Call yourself king. Save yourself." Why did Jesus do this? Well, we hear a snippet when he was on this. For they do not know what they are doing. But the last thing he said was this: "It is finished." Jesus said, "It is finished." And then he died. The Romans were pros at doing this, and so they sent a guard up to stab Jesus to make sure he was really dead. And of course, he was. Jesus had died. But what's this all about? The chances are that you know this story, even though you maybe don't go to church. Maybe you have no connection to your church, or you've never read the Bible for yourself. We all know the story of Jesus dying on the cross. But what is it all about? Well, you see, Jesus in dying on the cross, what he was doing, he was dying for sinners. This was God's purpose. God's plan hadn't failed. Jesus hadn't let down his Father in heaven. It was all part of the plan. Jesus dying for sinners. What is sin? Well, sin is how we actively disobey God, how we turn our back on God and want to go our own way. And the issue is that we have all sinned. We all rebel against God. We aren't obedient to Him. And the issue with sin is that it must be punished. It separates us from a holy and a righteous God. So here's the problem. Can you see it? We all have sin. Sin separates us from God. Sin must be punished. What are we to do about this? We are helpless. We cannot undo our bad things. We cannot get rid of our sin on our own. And that's where Jesus steps into the story. That's where the cross becomes good. Because as Jesus died on the cross, what he was doing was taking sin on himself. The punishment on himself. This is what happened at the cross as an illustration. Imagine that this hand represents you and me. And this book represents our sin. Now imagine this hand represents Jesus. We see how our sin is as a burden to us. It separates us, causes a barrier between us and God. But this is what happened on the cross for those who have faith and trust in Jesus. Sin is transferred to Jesus. Jesus takes sin on himself, takes the punishment, takes the wrath of God. And if we believe in him, we are free from sin. More than that, we actually receive the righteousness of Christ. we stand before God as right. That's what happened on the cross. When Jesus said, "It is finished," what he was saying was that his mission is accomplished. What is finished is the work of salvation. And now it's up to you. Do you believe in this story? Do you believe that it is true, that it's a historical fact? Do you believe that Jesus died for sinners such as you? I hope and trust that you do. Because as Jesus says, "It is finished" on the cross, it means in him you can have life forever because of what he has done.